Well, there is still plenty of offseason to go, but today we are going to look at what the lineup card could look like for the 2025 Detroit Tigers. All today on Locked On Tigers.
You are Locked On Tigers, your daily Detroit Tigers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of Locked On Tigers. I'm, of course, your host, Scott Bentley. Today is Monday, January 13th, 2025. Thank you so much for making Locked On Tigers your first listen. Every single day, we are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel. New customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets, guaranteed, win or lose. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. Welcome in, everyone. Hope you all had a fantastic weekend. It was a slow weekend in terms of Tigers news. We have a couple of small minor updates we'll throw on to the end of the show. But nothing big enough to garner, like, we're going to spend the whole show talking about this and really break down what this could mean for Detroit and whatnot. So we'll get to those at the end. A bulk of today's show is going to be talking about what the Tigers lineup card could look like in 2025. So Fangraphs, who we used last week to talk about Zips projections, also has a really cool tool, some rhyming there, that is a lineup projector. And they use a lot of resources to help do that. Obviously, news and notes, like Colt Keith is already at first base here, so they have their great team over at Fangraphs, obviously addressing stuff like that. And then they use a lot of numbers and analytics to determine order and stuff like that. So we are going to just take a look today at a lot of different possibilities. Parker Meadows, where's his standing from both sides of the plate? Gleyber Torres, the newest addition. Obviously, your mainstays, Greene, Carpenter, Verling, Colt Keith now at first base, Trey Sweeney, Javi Baez, right? Like, I think there is some shuffling around that has just inherently happened throughout the winter. And I also think that there's some that are kind of set in stone already. And the reason why this is so interesting to me and why I really wanted to do it now, and then we will do it again, in spring training when we're talking about, we actually know who's going to be on the team fully, and we're talking about, what the opening day lineup could look like. The reason why I want to do it now as well is because I think it highlights the needs that are still prevalent. And that's not to say that everyone who's listening to this show doesn't already know, because I'm assuming if you're listening to a daily show about the Tigers, you follow the team pretty closely, you're probably already decently well aware. But I think that this does a really good job of highlighting those team needs still. So we're going to start with Parker Meadows. Fangraphs says Parker Meadows as the projected leadoff hitter for your Detroit Tigers in 2025 and playing center field. I absolutely love it. I have no notes, no other conversations or speculations. I think that is spot on. And I think the only conversation to have is, would he still be leadoff against lefties? In a perfect world, he is your leadoff hitter for the next 10 years. Like that is the dream. Now, he has to prove it by hitting well against lefties, because if he doesn't, then he will hit 9. But I do think that he showed at minimum enough in the second half and in that hot stretch he had in the last month and a half, 2 months of the season, to where you're not benching him against lefties anymore. He is far too valuable, even if he isn't putting the ball in play with his bat. He is far too valuable in every other area. He still can draw walks against lefties. He's a great walk drawer. So that's something you want in the lineup either way. And if he does get on base, you're talking about one of the truly elite of the elite base runners. And then even if he goes 0 for 4 with 4 strikeouts on 12 pitches, you're talking about one of a guy that over a course of 162, I genuinely believe could be one of the best defensive center fielders in our beautiful sport. So I would love to see him lead off against both. I think in spring training, that will be one of the questions that is answered. But I do think that at worst, you're talking about him leading off against righties and hitting, 7 through 9 against lefties. Similar to what we saw last year, to be honest. That was in September. That is what it was, right? Gleyber Torres, Fangraphs has hitting second in the lineup against righties. I think that's, well, wrong. I am trying to find a more eloquent way of putting that. I don't think there is one really. I think Gleyber Torres will be a prominent part of this lineup. I think that he will be in the top half of the lineup. And against either handedness pitcher, I fully expect him to be like they signed him because of his bat. I in a perfect world, he's going to be one of your top, 4 or 5 hitters on your team, which induces, again, top half of the lineup bat. Him hitting second against righties, I have a really hard time believing. Not necessarily because of him, somewhat because of him, but more so just because your 2 best hitters last year were both lefties that hit righties really well. So I have a really hard time believing that with a right-handed pitcher on the mound, that Riley Greene or Kerry Carpenter are not going to be hitting second. That is the new age of baseball. There is a lot of lineup construction, I call it science, that has changed over the years, right? And a lot of teams these days put their best hitters either second or third, as opposed to you go further back in history, you're talking about more of like a 3 or 4 in a lineup. So I would be surprised if against righties, Gleyber was the 2-hitter. Against lefties, that changes a little bit. I think that it's very plausible for Gleyber Torres to be the 2-hitter again if a lefty is starting against your Detroit Tigers. Now, Riley Greene will still be a prominent fixture in the top half of the lineup against lefties. Kerry Carpenter we'll talk about a little bit later. But I think that's kind of where I stand with his. He's not going to be platooned to the bench, but I do think that where he stands in the lineup will probably vary based on whether there's a righty or lefty on the mound. Now, if he goes out there and he starts hitting against righties like he did earlier in his career, then there you go. You're just going to, he'll hit like 4th or even second, I guess. It's possible. But I think it's far more likely that you're talking about him hitting 4th or 5th against right-handed pitching, and then he can be that, maybe number 2 or, again, number 4 hitter against left-handed pitching. Riley Greene, Fangraphs has as your 3-hitter and playing left field. Don't really have too much to add there. As I just stated, not going to repeat myself fully, but if there is a righty on the mound, I would expect Greene to be in consideration for the 2 spot in the lineup. And if a lefty's on the mound, then yeah, you're talking about probably 3 or 4. Not because Greene still has pretty similar contact numbers. The swing and miss numbers don't vary too much. He still walks about the same. The power has just been vastly different in his major league career when you're talking about righty versus lefty. He didn't even have an extra base hit against the lefty until 2024. So that's a big thing that he is still working on and needs to adjust. But I fully expect him to be a top 4 hitter in this lineup, and he should be. He should be one of the prominent fixtures for your Detroit Tigers. Let's talk Kerry Carpenter, because that's a really, really, really interesting conversation. We'll do that right after this. Got to talk to y'all today about our friends over at FanDuel. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. The FanDuel app gives you everything you need to place live bets, same-game parlays, and so much more. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, everybody, welcome back here. Segment 2, Locked On Tigers. Appreciate y'all for tuning in. As always, making us your first listen every single day. Shots at everydayers that do tune in every day. We will, of course, be back on Wednesday as we keep our offseason train rolling. We're obviously starting very slowly. I'm kind of dragging my feet because I want to save all of the preseason content we have lined up for you and already prepped and whatnot until after we know who's going to be on the team in 2025. But I do think that some conversations like this, the rotation one, you can have now, and it's kind of important, honestly, to have now so that we, again, can know what's going to happen further. But we'll be back on Wednesday either way, whether there's news or not. Also, something I want to bring up that I should have said at the top of the show, but you're going to get here at the start of segment 2. This is an AJ Hinch baseball team. It is very important to remember that. So when we're talking about, oh, what's the lineup going to look like? If you think for a single second that you are going to see the same lineup on back-to-back days very often, if not ever, in 2025, you have not been watching the Detroit Tigers since before 2021, okay? There's going to be a lot of mixing and matching. There's going to be matchup ball that is played. AJ loves to switch up the lineup card and mix and match and move people around based on the opponent. Okay, so we're doing this as like a baseline, but this should not be, okay, this is just going to be the lineup for 162 games. That we have a better chance at seeing 162 different lineups than we do honestly seeing like 5 of the same lineups, nonetheless seeing one lineup for 162 games. So want to point that out and throw that out there. I think that's important to mention. Kerry Carpenter, the presumed 4-hitter, according to Fangraphs, and the DH against righties. So the big question with Carp is, will he get more of an opportunity against lefties? I would love for him to get an opportunity more so against lefties. Just Baseball, the great people over at Just Baseball. Clay does a great job, does a lot of Tiger stuff for them, but their big show is also fantastic over there. So go give them a listen and a read and whatnot and support their work. But they had a clip go, I won't say viral, but made the rounds in Tigersville last week after they had a conversation about Kerry Carpenter and the fact that they also didn't want Kerry Carpenter to platoon anymore. And that's something that we've been talking about a lot on this show for my entire time hosting this show. I'm pretty sure the Kerry Carpenter, platoon debate has been prominent. And the biggest thing that they pointed out, and we've talked about a lot on this show too, is the minor league numbers don't indicate that this dude can't hit lefties. It's not like and there is a huge difference between pitching in the minor leagues and the majors, especially left-handed pitching in the minor leagues and the majors. I'm not saying that he definitely for sure can hit against lefties, but he had like 30 plate appearances against lefty pitching in 2024. At least give him some sort of an opportunity to prove himself in 2025. I think that would go a long way. Now, does that mean he has to hit cleanup or hit 2 or 3 against lefties, off bat in 2025? No. But I think that it doesn't have to be that black and white. He can hit 8th or 7th against lefties, and you can kind of see if you can ease him into it, because he becomes insurmountably more valuable if he is even a league average hitter against lefties. Do you know how different this lineup becomes if he even has, seriously, like he had an OPS of almost 1,000 against righties in 2024. If his OPS against lefties was like 700, you're talking about a guy who's going to be an all-star. Like legitimately. He doesn't have to be incredible on that side of the plate. He just has to be serviceable, and he becomes an everyday player that's going to be one of the better hitters in the sport. So, would love to see him get more of an opportunity, but against righties, yes, he's going to be in the top 4 in the lineup, and he should be every single day. Now, this is where it gets interesting. This kind of bottom 5 here. Matt Verling, right field, your projected 5-hitter in the Detroit Tigers lineup. That's ahead of names like Colt Keith, Jake Rogers, Trey Sweeney, Jace Young, etc. We'll get to some of those in a second. Verling's interesting because they have him at right field. And I think that this is the perfect opportunity to really highlight the big team need that the Tigers still need to address from here on out. And again, that's something that we are all very aware of and we've talked about a lot. This isn't like a cliffhanger. But Matt Verling being your everyday right fielder and Jace Young being your everyday projected third baseman, to spoilers a little bit, Fangraphs has Jace Young as the 7-hitter and your third baseman, highlights, okay, this team probably could really use this team could absolutely really use either a third baseman or a corner outfielder still. And that is why you hear these rumors about Anthony Santander. It's why, obviously, they're big players in Bregman. This is why, right? Why do you keep saying this? Why don't you just trust what they have, whatever. Let's make a lineup. This is why. This is nothing against Matt Verling, and I certainly am not just giving up on Jace Young after 2 months in the major leagues, okay? I think that Matt Verling absolutely has a prominent role on this team in 2025, and I think he'll be valuable and good at it because he has been already in his Tigers tenure. But to get over the hump, your glaring weaknesses in this lineup, you could always point to shortstop, which we'll talk about later. After that, it's one of those two. It's either you get a corner outfielder and move Verling to third, or you get a third baseman and Verling plays a lot more corner outfield. Right now, with neither, you have this. And even if you are in love with this and you're like, you know what, you're wrong, I disagree with you, I want Verling and Jace Young getting at bats, that's fine. You have no depth. One injury and this entire plan is out the window because your bench is Zach McKinstry, Andy Ibanez, Javi Baez, Dylan Dingler, and Akil Badu's no longer on your 40-man. So you're now all of a sudden, Matt Verling, Parker Meadows, Riley Greene, anybody in the outfield gets hurt, even a 10-day IL stint. You are absolutely toast. And now you're scrambling and you have to, again, re-add somebody to the 40-man or whatnot. Jace Young goes down, then you're back to the Andy Ibanez, Zach McKinstry platoon over at third base. Or Verling has to play third, and then you're still down an outfielder. And you're right back where you would have been if just Verling got hurt instead. You get my point? So that is absolutely something that is a glaring issue when you write it out on paper like this. And I think as it stands, I think Verling probably should be the 5 or 6 hitter on this team. And I think that he will take a ton of at-bats and play in over 120, 140 games for this team as a super utility guy that's going to play a bunch of different positions and be incredibly valuable. I love Matt Verling, but I think the penciling him in as the everyday third baseman, there are clear upgrades that are available for you, and he can still be a prominent part and do what he does and show off all of the tools he has and utilize those to a winning baseball team without being the everyday third baseman or right fielder or whatever. Okay. Colt Keith, first baseman, they have at 6th in the lineup. Colt Keith, I think, proved as a rookie that he's not a ready lefty platoon guy. He actually hit better, I think, against lefties when it was all said and done, OPS-wise, in 2024. So I certainly don't think that that's a platoon situation, which is probably why they felt comfortable moving him to first base so that they can have just a consistent everyday first baseman there. I'm expecting big things out of Colt Keith this year, man. We'll get to our player preview series when we get closer to spring training, and we're back on 5 episodes a week. I really think that Colt Keith is going to take a big step forward offensively. And if he can be just sound, just, average to slightly above average defensively at first base, you're talking about a guy who could be pretty darn good for this team for a long time. So I am expecting big things, and I'm hoping that by, opening day or after spring training, we're talking about, Colt Keith being a top of the lineup bat for this team. But if he's hitting even remotely close to what his ceiling truly is, and he's hitting 5 or 6, then that means your lineup is doing something right and is a pretty decent offensive output on the season. So we'll see what happens there. Bottom 3, Jace Young, Jake Rogers, Trey Sweeney. We'll talk about that and all the combinations that come with that bottom 3 right after this. All right, everybody, welcome back here. Third and final segment of Locked On Tigers. Appreciate y'all for tuning in as always. So the bottom 3 in the Tigers lineup projected by Fangraphs is Jace Young at third base, Jake Rogers at catcher, and Trey Sweeney at shortstop. Now, this is presumably against a right-handed pitcher. I really do believe that the shortstop situation this year is just going to be a strict and straight platoon. I really do think that it's going to be, if there's a righty on the mound, it's Trey Sweeney. And if there's a lefty on the mound, you're getting Javi Baez. And they're going to see if that can be serviceable. They're not going to look as much at the two players' individual production as opposed to what production are they getting out of the shortstop position as a whole. And if they do both of those things, I think the hope is going to be that it can be even if it's, slightly below league average, at least a serviceable production from shortstop in 2025. Okay. Now, Trey Sweeney and Javi Baez, no matter who's there, I'm in favor of them hitting 9. Don't care who it is. Not a slight against Trey Sweeney. Still, very young, 24 years old, still has plenty of potential, could take steps forward. At the beginning of the year, I want whoever is playing shortstop, don't care who it is that day, to be hitting 9. Jake Rogers and Dylan Dingler obviously is the catching tandem. Both of them are righties, which makes the conversation surrounding like a strict platoon a little bit more complicated and murky. I don't think you're going to see that, but I do think you're probably going to see more Jake Rogers than Dylan Dingler. Two big questions out of catcher this year. One, can Jake Rogers get closer to what he was offensively in 2023? Because if he can, you're talking about a guy who's going to be actually one of the more valuable catchers in baseball, because that's legitimately what he was when he was hitting well in 2023. And two, and probably the far bigger one, is just, can Dylan Dingler hit at the major league level? I think he can. I think he'll figure it out. He's notoriously, throughout his professional career, been promoted, slow start, then once he adjusts to timing, settles in and is a pretty good offensive option. So I expect that to happen still. But we'll see. And they're putting all their eggs in that basket. They did not sign any other, backup catchers to compete with them for a major league spot. There's still offseason left. That could happen. But as it stands right now, it's going to be Jake Rogers and Dylan Dingler, and they both better hit to make that a serviceable and good, solid catching duo. Because if both of them figure it out, if Dingler becomes offensively what we think he could be, and Jake Rogers is much closer to what he was in 2023 at the plate, you're talking about a team that could legitimately be in the top 10, dare I even say like top 5 or 7 in terms of production from the catching position in baseball. So a wide array of possible production there. We'll again, obviously go way more in depth on that when we start our player preview series. Jace Young is going to be the big question mark here. I'm not going to retread the exact same conversation we had with Verling, but it's a very much not a similar sentiment, the same sentiment. It's the same conversation, right? You go out, you can get Bregman, Jace Young can still develop. And like Jace Young's natural position isn't even third base. And you just moved Colt Keith to first base. So like, me saying, that's one of the biggest replies I get when I'm so adamant on like, go, spend big money, get a third baseman or whatever. Like, oh, like you're just giving up on Jace Young. No, I'm not. He was a second baseman in college. He was a second baseman his entire professional career in the minors. And then last year, because Colt Keith got called up, they thought, oh, let's try him at third base. It didn't go very well either. He was not a very good defensive third baseman whatsoever. I think. And now Colt Keith is off of second base, and your current second baseman's on a 1-year deal. You can lock up someone long-term at third. You can move Colt Keith to first. You can go, and Jace Young can play his actual, like, natural position. And if he hits well, then there you go. Problem solved. You have your second baseman of the future. But that doesn't mean you have to hand over the keys and just completely sell out and go like, oh, well, it's either Jace Young or we're just screwed at third base for 2025 either. So that's kind of where I stand on that. I think that when your bench, again, Dingler, Baez, Ibanez, and McKinstry, I guess, Javi and Trey Sweeney is probably close to a 50-50 split, but that's how they have it listed here. Andy Ibanez, we all know, going to get a lot of opportunities against left-handed pitching, not going to play much against right-handed pitching. Probably going to get a lot of reps over at third base, I would imagine, with now that Gleyber Torres is on the team, because Gleyber's going to be, you definitely want Gleyber in against lefties. So he's not going to platoon for him. I think you'll probably see a lot of Andy Ibanez, maybe a little bit more in the corner outfield too, depending on that, because as we know, the Tigers outfield is currently full of lefties. It's all lefties and then Matt Verling. So I think that opens the door a little bit more for him to play out there well, but he does need to improve defensively there. And then Zach McKinstry, super utility, can play pretty much anywhere. Going to get some opportunities against righties on the mound, as we know very well, too. So that's where they stand. That's where Fangraph stands. Parker Meadows, Gleyber Torres, Riley Greene, Kerry Carpenter, Matt Verling, Colt Keith, Jace Young, Jake Rogers, and Trey Sweeney. Not what I have. I have more of a like Parker Meadows, Riley Greene, Kerry Carpenter, Gleyber Torres, Colt Keith, Matt Verling, Jake Rogers, who's ever at third base, and then Trey Sweeney. And like, again, I mean, imagine you plug Bregman into that, right? We can play that game really quickly. You replace Jace Young with Alex Bregman. Bregman immediately becomes one of your top 3 to 4 hitters, right? Immediately somewhere in there. He's not going to hit leadoff. Parker will still do that. I think you might even make Bregman your 2 hitter, and then Gleyber can hit 4, or even Gleyber can hit 5. Yeah, man, that would be some depth, wouldn't it? Oh, I'm salivating. I just started drooling on camera. Yeah, that would be. And then Matt Verling, Colt Keith would be like your 6, 7. Oh, the lineup depth. It just becomes so much deeper. You know how, like, it's one guy, and baseball is like Barry Bonds never won a ring, right? Like baseball is such a team sport, but just listen to how much deeper your lineup gets by adding one premier talent, one player out of 9, and it instantly makes the lineup just worlds deeper. Oh, that is just beautiful. Okay. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. He's going to go to Boston, and I'm going to be disappointed and sad. But that is what the lineup is projected to be right now. There's still a lot of variation there. We'll talk a lot more about this throughout spring training, obviously, and this will change. This is like, you know what I mean? This is not going to be the opening day lineup. This absolutely can and will change. This is very early. We are doing this intentionally so we can kind of get a grasp of what we're expecting and what we still want going forward. Okay, so before you come at me with why are we doing this early, or I totally disagree with this, you are probably right. Like this is not what the lineup card will look like, but we still got months and months to go until we're talking about this product being put on a field, and we're talking about player evaluation and stuff. Okay. Only other small updates I have for you is that Bo Brisky did reach a deal with the Tigers, a 1-year deal, a little over $1 million for the 2025 season. So the Tigers avoid arbitration with everyone, which is beautiful and awesome and exactly what we want to see. So good for them, good for him. And then the last one is Anthony Santander is now reportedly, according to The Athletic, willing to take fewer years and higher AAV. I don't even care. Like, again, I see these updates every day, and I know we talked about this on Friday's show, but it's just like at some point it's barely even holds weight, because it's like, okay, well, tomorrow I'm going to read something about how he wants an 8-year deal. Like it's never ending, and yeah, let's make something happen. Let's make January a good one. All right. I appreciate you all greatly for tuning in. Thanks for making Locked On Tigers your first listen every single day. Shout out to the everydayers that do tune in every day. We will, of course, be back on Wednesday as we recap the week, talk about any news and notes, and so forth, just like we have been doing. Again, really do appreciate you all for continuing to tune in. The numbers for this show continue to stay really, really solid, even in what is largely like the dead part of the offseason. We're at 3 episodes a week, and even then, I mean, we're already talking about lineups. Like, I don't have like active news for you today, and the numbers haven't wavered. So I really do appreciate you all from the bottom of my heart. We'll be back Wednesday. Peace and love. Going to therapy's dope. I'll catch you all then, baby. Go Tigers.